Well, thank you everybody for coming out. I appreciate it tremendously. I know there's a lot of stuff that you guys could obviously be doing. Fantastic turnout, and again, those guys have done truly an amazing job. I've done these all over. This is exceptional. Like, what's going on here is awesome. I'm Victor Nieves. If you haven't heard anything about me, I don't blame you. A little bit of background. So I am the president of an organization called Life Issues Institute. It was founded back in the 90s, a long time ago, by one of the true fathers of the pro-life movement, Dr. Jack Wilkie. Over the years, I wrote a book. It was an Amazon #1 new release titled Conservative Prudence. I was a radio host in St. Louis. I've done, I don't even know, it's almost embarrassing to admit, the thousands of hours of debates that I've done on topics exactly like this. And so the question that we will be answering today is, should men have a say in abortion? And as it was mentioned, it's a controversial topic. There are plenty of people, I've been told this more times than I can count, that say if you're a man, you should not speak on this issue. You should be silent, and for a long time, big problem, men actually have been silent. And that's, I'll highlight why that's a really big issue. But to answer the question, yes, men absolutely should have a say on abortion. People might ask, well, why? Why do you think a man should have a say on something like this, even though no man has ever gotten pregnant, no man ever will get pregnant, despite what some people may try to say? Abortion is a moral issue. Abortion, unlike all of the other, oftentimes people will say men just want to control a woman's body, right? If a man speaks out on this issue, you'll be lectured and told you shouldn't do that, you just want to control a woman's body. I have no interest in that. I have negative interest whatsoever in ever controlling a woman's body. Does anybody ever stop and take a step back and think, what an obscure, what a random topic, right? If men were actually out to just control women, did we just put all of the topics we could possibly pick from in a hat, ripped up little pieces of paper, we shook it around and we drew one out, and we're like, yeah, abortion, that's the only thing that we're gonna care about? No, there's something unique to abortion, that is, it is a moral issue, and the truth of it is that abortion either is the intentional killing of an innocent human being, or it is not. It's a dichotomy. There's not that many times in life where we run into a true blue absolute dichotomy, but abortion is one such dichotomy. It literally is, that it's the intentional killing of a human being, or it is not. And if it is, let's think about the scope of this for just a second. If abortion is, in fact, murder, it is the largest mass murder we have ever seen. The stakes are high. You don't have to agree with me yet, right? You could be pro-abortion and you could disagree with everything I'm saying. That is a fact. There have been 65 million abortions in this country alone since we started tracking, by the way, in 1973. So there's been more than this, and we have plenty of states that don't report our data on this. We have plenty of states that are very hostile toward these numbers, and these numbers are largely gathered, funny enough, by the Pro-Abortion Guttmacher Institute. There's a couple others that compile these numbers, and so at least it's somewhere in the ballpark of 65 million people have lost their lives, potentially, right? This is the stakes of what we're talking about. So hopefully we can get this to play. I don't know that it'll run. If so, thank you so much. I want you to watch this for just a second.
I just want to tell you I'm pregnant, but don't worry, I'm going to take care of it tomorrow. And I said, what does that mean exactly? And I think I kind of knew, right? And I said, no, I tell you what, I'll come there and we'll get married. She said, well, I don't want to marry you. I said, okay, fine, I'll take the kid and I'll raise it. You don't even have to meet it. She said, I just started a new career. I'm not going to go to work pregnant and then just not have a baby. Well, let's give it up for adoption then. I mean, I was begging. I said, don't do anything. I'll be there first thing in the morning. She said, don't bother coming. My appointment's at 7 a.m. and it'll be done by the time you get here. Then the last thing I remember saying on the phone to her was, screaming at the top of my lungs, please don't kill my baby. And she said, it's not a baby and it's not your decision. She hung up. I just remember screaming and yelling at the top of my lungs and throwing stuff around my apartment. It impacted the rest of the next 10 years.
I would challenge anyone, I know this was a bit of an emotional appeal before we get into the logic of everything. I would challenge anyone to sit down and look that man in the eye and tell him that the baby that he had killed was not a human being. I would challenge anybody who says that men fundamentally do not have a voice on this topic. Sit down and tell that to him. This is a guy who begged and pleaded with everything he had in him for his child to survive. Unfortunately, his child did not. If we can jump to the next one. So I want to briefly, I've made clear the stakes of this situation. Again, you don't yet have to agree with me, but if I'm right and abortion really is murder, well, it's the biggest mass murder ever. Now I want to make the case for why I'm right. Why it actually is true that yes, abortion is murder. But let's start with the premise, and hopefully we can all agree. I promise this is not like a catch. I'm not trying to pull one over on you. Hopefully everybody in this room would agree with this simple premise. I don't care how you get to it. I don't care if you're Hindu, Christian, Muslim, whatever you might be. We should all hopefully agree that murder is inherently wrong. If we agree on that, we'll get to why abortion is obviously murder. So the key question is whether or not the unborn baby is an innocent human being. If yes, it's murder. If no, it's more like getting a haircut. Remember, I made the joke, who thinks that men are just out to control women's bodies? If men were out to control women's bodies, we'd be legislating against, I don't know, the pixie cut or something, or we'd be legislating against certain types of nail polish. I don't have any, no one wants to do that. You might have a preference, sure, but nobody's going to stand here and say, well, we need to be legislating this because haircuts are not moral issues. Obviously, we don't care about anything that somebody's going to be doing. We might have preferential care, but we don't care in the sense that it's a moral issue. So let's lay out a couple of biological facts. None of these are my opinion. To be very, very clear, not a single thing I'm about to show you is an opinion of mine. These are facts. So first, the unborn baby, following fertilization, regardless of the stage of development, the unborn baby is alive. This is not really disputed by anybody who's being honest. We can tell because it's growing, it's developing, it's maturing, replacing its own cells. There's a 96% consensus among biologists that life begins at conception. If you go on this campus and you find the library and you bust out every embryology textbook, I promise you, life begins at conception. This is not a matter of opinion, this is a matter of fact. But there's lots of living things, okay? Trees, grass, I'm not gonna freak out if you cut your lawn or whatever. The unborn baby is also human. Also not a tricky thing to prove. Every strand of DNA belongs to the species Homo sapien. Okay, the next one though, because the first two can be true, but it still might not be that big of a deal. The first two are actually true of a cancer cell. So it's not enough. It's not enough to just be alive. It's not enough to just be human, but it's also a distinct organism. It's an important scientific term here, but it's not a skin cell. It's not a gamete. It's not a part. This is important. It's not a part. It's a whole. It's an entire organism, not a piece of another organism, not the product of another organism. It is itself an organism. You know what we say when we apply this checklist to anything? Anything in this room, a dog, a cat, the carpet I'm standing on, if we apply this checklist and every single one of those three things proves true, we would call it a human being. You do this if you walk into Walmart. You inherently know. Anybody you see, yeah, that's a human being. What's the difference between them and a dog? A dog doesn't fit this criteria, right? So once we have this, I would make the case that abortion, we've now clarified, is in fact mass murder. So now, the question remains, if we've established that abortion is mass murder, do you need to check your pants before you get to have a say on something like this? It's a moral issue. Would you ever, think for real, think for just a second. Out of all of the experiences in your life that involved a moral question, did you ever stop and go, wait a minute, do I have the right anatomy to speak on this? Or do I need to step this one out? A moral question is anybody gets to have a say on a moral question. And throughout history, we've seen countless examples where there are horrible things, genocide and chattel slavery, and we've said, why didn't people say anything? You know, when you were in 3rd or 4th grade and you first cracked open a history book and you started to get the not nice history, you know, they don't give it to you when you're really young. When you get a little older, they give you the not nice history, the chattel slavery, the genocides, the horrible barbarity that we've seen throughout human history. Every single one of you, I hope and pray, when you were in 4th grade and you learned about these things for the first time, you stopped and you thought, if I was alive in 1845, I would have been an abolitionist. I would have said something, right? Or if I was alive in 1938 Germany and the rise of the Third Reich, you would have said something, right? Right, well, you have a chance, my friends. You have a chance right now. You are living in one such time in history where you do have the chance to say and do something, and I promise you, it has nothing to do with your genitals. Nothing to do, because these are moral questions. They do not have a biological prerequisite to speak out on them. The reason people don't speak up is because they want to put themselves in a silo. And they want to say, no, that's not mine. You know, there's a very famous story during the Holocaust of a church, a Christian church, that happened to be very close to the railroad tracks. And they could hear on Sundays when they would get together, they could hear people screaming as they went by on the box carts on their way, I believe it was to Dachau. They could hear the people screaming on the train. You know what the pastor did, and shame on him? The pastor told the congregation, sing louder. Sing louder so you don't have to hear the screams of the innocent people who are being sent to freaking Dachau. Are you going to sing louder? Are you going to put yourself in a silo and say, that's not my fight? This is the biggest moral issue of our lives. It's your fight. I don't care if you're a man. I don't care if you're a woman. I don't care if you're confused. It's your fight. This is your fight because it is the biggest mass murder we've ever seen. Everybody has a voice against evil. Let's think about this for just a second. Imagine that you told somebody, hang on, you have never been human trafficked. Listen, I've never been, thank God, I've never been human trafficked. Not a day in my life. You bet your bottom dollar I'm against human trafficking, okay? Never has impacted me. Odds are it never will. I pray to God, it will never impact me. But I'm going to speak out against human trafficking. Slavery, I was never a slave. Never a slave. Nobody I knew was ever a slave. But you bet your bottom dollar, if it starts popping off now and it doesn't affect me, I'm going to speak out about it. I'm going to say, hey, that's a horrible thing. That's a terrible thing. Genocide, the same examples. We could go on and on and on. Now, I want to make the case also that abortion does impact men. So it's a moral issue, and moral issues don't have to directly impact you. But let's think back to the video I showed you a minute ago. Abortion does impact men. A little quick math. 75 million, like we said. 75 million abortions since 1973. Millions of fathers. Every one of those children had a dad. Every single one of those. That guy in that clip that I showed you, he's not an isolated instance. That's not one of one. That's one of millions. There have been millions of men in that guy's seat, whether they said anything or not. Men are oftentimes ignored, neglected, told that it's not that big of a deal, and that's a shame. But millions of men, think about this. Let's do a little quick math again. Roughly half of all babies are boys. Roughly half of all abortions were boys. What are you going to tell me? I don't get to have a say on something that presumably killed about 32.5 million men? Do I not have something of a collective vested interest in what happens to 32.5 million boys? I think I get to have a say. A third of Gen Z was killed. So look around, most of us are probably Gen Z. A third of our friends, our etc., were killed. A third of us were killed. So again, more quick math, split it down the middle, it's about a sixth. About a sixth of the men, so all the fellas in the room, about a sixth of you. Imagine something that you survived that killed a sixth of all of your friends. Would you not say something about it? Would you not think, hey, that's pretty freaking relevant to say something about what's happening right here? And also, I want to address this lie that we live in a vacuum, that we can have some sort of moral decay to the point at which we look the other way as children are killed. As a society, again, let's just hypothetically say none of this is true, abortion doesn't affect a man. Let's say in a crazy world that there's never been a man ever, no boys were ever killed in an abortion. Not one male baby was ever killed. Hypothetically. Doesn't matter. These things don't exist in a vacuum. If we live in a society that says you can kill 30 million female babies because they're female babies. By the way, this happens. There are sex-selective abortions all around the world where people say, I don't really want to have a girl. There are racist people who have a one-night stand with somebody of the opposite race or whatever, and they say, no, I don't want to have a baby with darker skin than me. I'm going to kill that baby because of the race of that baby. It's happened. It's happened thousands and thousands of times. If we as a society decide that we're just going to go, it's not that big of a deal, I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to ignore the significance of the devaluing of the sanctity of human life. Where do you think that goes? But let's take this to its logical conclusion. A world where we look the other way, how do you think your medical care is going to be? We get rid of the sanctity of human life. Now you need life-saving medical care, but brother, you're too expensive. I got bad news for you. You cost too dang much. The value of human life has been thrown out the window. We just look the other way when we kill other people. How about your grandma who ends up in a serious situation? She might not have that much longer to live, but with proper medical care, she could be around for a long time. Another year? Wouldn't you want another year out of your grandma? But if they say, no, that's okay. We don't really need to worry about that. We're just going to allow the death of innocent people. This does not exist in a vacuum. None of it exists in a vacuum. The consequences are horrible. Now, you may have seen this image. I don't know if anybody is on like X or whatever very often. This had like 100 and something million views on X. So if you haven't seen it, just take a second to look at it. We have a little boy, he's on a swing with his dad. They're building some blocks and all that stuff, and then you have the realization here at the end, let him go. The abortion was months ago. There are millions of men And I would say that the views that this had on social media are a testament to this fact. There are millions of men who are experiencing this exact image. They've been ignored. They've been told this is not your fight. They've been told to step out of it. They've been told your kid wasn't real, so what the heck are you doing being depressed about it? What does it matter? By the way, they do the same thing to women who have had miscarriages. They say, oh, it's tough. Why are you crying? Why are you crying? Why does it matter? If it's not a human being, why does it matter? See, it's funny, the left and the pro-aborts, they do this little switch that they like to play, where it's a human when they want it to be and it's not a human when they don't want it to be. Isn't that convenient? You get to just devalue a human being just when you feel like it. Whenever you just decide, oh, I don't really want to mess with that anymore, we'll just call it not a human. You know who else has done that, by the way? Going back to the whole genocide, chattel slavery. Throughout history, this isn't unique. This whole thing of saying, well, it's not a human if I don't want it to be a human. Do you think this is you think this is like a new idea we've never heard of before? I can think of a couple off the top of my head where somebody said, yeah, well, it's a human. I get it. I get like biologically that's a human being. But I'm going to come up with some sort of philosophical explanation as to why I should still be able to do unto it whatever I want. Genocide, sex trafficking, well, that's a person, but like, not really. I'll just kind of pretend it's not. By the way, for men, there are so many men who have been impacted by this. You're not alone. There are millions and millions of men. I want to point you to a resource, menandabortion.net. There's free peer-to-peer counseling on this. It's anonymous. You don't have to tell anybody. You can step away from it in a way. There's also some amazing resources, menforlife.org, and also on menandabortion.net, where you can find scientific research on this. You can see the way that this has destroyed men's lives. People who are told, you've had no real reason. Why did your life spiral out of control? And then they sit down with a good therapist, a good counselor, and they backtrack throughout their life, and they realize, oh, I know when everything changed. A good friend of mine, Sean Corcoran, some of you may know, he actually is the one who made the connection for me to speak at this event. Sean Corcoran, this guy is a rock star. He's brilliant. His whole life was ahead of him. He was amazing, still is amazing. But when he was in college, he had a girl kill his child. And he begged and he pleaded, much like that first video, begged and he pleaded, do not kill my child. But the law allows nothing. It's not like a man can hog tie a woman, God forbid, and keep her there for 9 months and say, no, you're not allowed to abort my child. The law says she can kill the child for whatever reason, and the man is left to do basically nothing. The man can beg and he can plead. Well, such was the case with my friend. She got the abortion, ruined his life. Totally ruined his life. He was a great student. He was in college. He was all this stuff. Totally ruined his life. It destroyed him because men are hardwired with a desire to protect. And when they're not able to protect, it is devastating. I mean, absolutely devastating. And this has happened to millions of men. We live in a society that loves to talk about mental health. May I introduce to you a topic for which we ought to speak. The mental health of the men who are just left really up a creek. As I said, men have a hardwired desire to protect their children. There's something that changed in me when I found out my wife was pregnant. There's a hardwired desire. I would crawl through broken glass for 15 miles for the child that is in my wife right now. I would do absolutely anything for my wife as well. And there's something about a man where that's built into you. Men need to stand up and not allow themselves to say, I'm going to sit this one out because it's a little bit uncomfortable. I'm going to sit this one out because somebody on campus might ask me, what are you doing talking about abortion? I'm going to sit this one out. No. Men need to stand up and have a voice. They say oftentimes, and I actually agree with them, I'll extend a bit of an olive branch to people on the pro-abortion side. They'll say, well, if a woman can't get an abortion, then a man needs to, and oftentimes it'll be something like he needs to be legally required to stay with the woman and help with the child. Your terms are acceptable. I would be more than happy to have men stand up and actually be a part of it, because it takes two to tango, brother. If you get somebody pregnant, it's time for you to buck up. It's time for you to be involved in her life. A lot of times we're told, men are told, that if you get somebody pregnant and she's not sure what to do, the correct thing for you as a man is to tell her, I'll do whatever you want to do. Or they'll say it like this oftentimes, I will support whatever you want to do. Wrong answer. That is the wrong. People think it's the good answer. You want to, well, I'm just going to be supportive. No, you just took the whole burden in the scariest moment of this woman's life and dumped it on her and said, I'm out. You figure it out. It's all on you. Everything that happens from here on out is your call. I'll back you up, but it's your call. No. No, you need to tell her, I will I will move heaven and earth. I will crawl through broken glass. I will do everything I can. The most powerful thing a man could say to a woman who's in a horrible, confused, scared situation with a pregnancy she didn't expect, the best thing that you can say to her is, I will be a good dad to that child, and I will be a good man by you. I will do everything I can. That's the correct answer. That is the required answer, by the way, gentlemen. If you're pro-life, that is the required answer. Is to say, I will move heaven and earth. I might be the biggest idiot you've ever known in your entire life, but this idiot will go to war for you. I will do everything I can. That's the correct answer. Now I want to mention that there can be no victory. Hopefully I made the case for why I'm pro-life today. And so, with everything I've said, abortion is the biggest mass murder, so on and so forth, we need to win this, do we not? Do we not need to stop this horrible atrocity, 65 million people that have been killed? There can be no victory without men. Well, if we think about it, again, a little quick math, we're half the population. Men are half of the population. Can you think of one thing ever, of all of the horrible atrocities in human history, where half of the population just straight up said, no, I'm out. I'm not doing anything with that. I'm out all the way. Do you think they would win? Like any successful event, I guess I should have said that. Any successful time in human history where we beat a grand evil, a genocide, a slavery, and the men were not involved? Come on, that's not going to happen. It's half the population. By the way, it's also cute to me, anecdotally. We're told as men not to have a say on this, so long as we're pro-life. Isn't that's interesting, right? So long as you're pro-life, you're not allowed to speak on this issue. But if you're pro-abortion, oh, they would welcome you with open arms. You get to talk about this issue all day long. You're not going to be lectured about how this is only a women's issue. But men, I may offend people with this, men are unique. Men and women are different, whether people like to acknowledge that or not. Men bring unique skills, strengths, talents, perspectives to the battle. This is a battle for life. Again, I'll remind you of the scope and the scale and the significance, the stakes of this situation. Men bring unique skills to this battle. Men and women are different, we're complementary. There are things that women are profoundly amazing at that men are not so great at. And this has been the truth in the pro-life movement for a long time. There have been women who, God bless them, have been at the tip of the spear. They've been in the trenches. They've been fighting day in and day out, giving blood, sweat, tears, everything that they have to the pro-life movement. And the men, if the women are up on stage over here fighting the fight, the men are like somewhere back here. And they're kind of like peeking out every night, and they don't want anything to do with it. They don't want anything to do with it, which means that the most important moral issue, the most important fight of our lives, we have half of the population who bring unique skills and unique abilities, and they're not doing anything. They're not involved and they're not fighting. To the pro-life, I don't know the makeup of the audience here, so maybe all of you are pro-abortion, I doubt it. To the pro-life men in the audience, I want to paint a picture for you. There is a troll on a bridge, and every day that troll shows up with a basket of babies. And he reaches in and he chucks them off the bridge, one by one, chucks them off, and they fall into the water below, and they go rushing downstream. And for years, there's been all of these amazing women, like, I don't know, maybe it's a group of nuns or something. There's been these amazing women who are downriver, and they see the babies floating down the river, and they freak out, rightfully so, and they say, we got to get these babies. We got to pick them up out of the water, get the baskets, and they're swimming their day in and their day out. They're trying to save the babies, but they're downstream. And that is an amazing work. That is amazing work that they're doing. We can see this in the pro-life space, by the way, in the form of post-abortive recovery. We see this as an amazing, amazing ministry for women who have already had abortions. To love them, to show them grace, to show them there is healing from the horrible thing that they did. But there's another option, gentlemen. We don't have to stay downstream, scooping the babies out of the water. I have a proposition for you. How about me and you grab a sword, we march upstream, and we cut the frickin' head off of the troll so he never throws another baby into the river ever again? I'm down for that. Are you down for that? Are you going to grab a sword, you're going to march uphill, you're going to cut the head off of that troll? Because that's what has to be done. We have a huge issue right now in this country. Day after day, babies thrown in the water, babies thrown in the water. We're scooping them up, we're scooping them up. Done. It's done. End it. We need to end it. And abortion can be ended in our lifetimes. I believe that. I fully believe that. 100%. In part, because we have a blessed opportunity standing on the shoulders of giants, generations who came before, who fought tirelessly to kill the troll, But we have an opportunity, my friends. It doesn't have to be a situation where we think, well, it took 50 years to get here, and it'll probably take another 50 more. No, it does. It does not need to have that. That is a self-fulfilling defeatist prophecy. I'm never impressed by anybody who predicts their own failure. Congratulations, that's quite the accomplishment. You predicted your own inability to do something. No, I predict we can do this, and it starts in rooms like this. It starts with all the gentlemen in this room who say, ladies, thank God for you. Y'all have been fighting this fight. You got backup now. You got men who are going to show up and behave. It's very common. People in the pro-life space love to say things, right? They love to say stuff. Abortion is murder. Abortion is this. Yes, that's all true, 100%. But there's something missing in that. Act like it. Where are we going to act like there's a troll on this freaking bridge? When are we going to act like there's 65 million? Last year, 1.1 million kids were killed. 1.1 million kids were killed. Could you imagine? Try to put this into perspective. What's the biggest stadium in Houston? I don't know. What is the biggest, Astros or something? Big giant stadium in Houston. Fill that sucker up and kill everybody in it. Fill it up again. Kill everybody in it. Fill it up again. You'd be there for weeks. You'd be doing that for weeks to get the number of kids killed last year. Add it up, 65 million? You kidding me? You kidding me? When are we going to start acting like it? And this is to the women as well, obviously, but the topic today is men and abortion. Should men have a say? Yes, men should have a say. My goodness, how could men not have a say? How could we not? It is a moral issue. It is the moral issue of our day. I plead, I beg of you, gentlemen, pick up the sword. Come with me. Not literally, by the way. Don't freak out and be dumb about it. But pick up the sword and come with me and cut the head off of the worst human rights violation we've ever seen. I think you were first.
So I think abortion is illegal in Texas, is that correct?
Kind of.
So what else can be done in the case of when you say pick up the sword?
Yeah.
What can be done? What is the expectation?
Amazing question. I love that. So abortion is kind of illegal in Texas. There's a couple of very significant caveats in Texas. I might offend people with this one, but it's the truth. Right now in Texas, are we in Montgomery County? What county are we in? Harris County. Oh, okay. So let's pick a better county. Let's say you go. Montgomery County is the most conservative county in Texas. Very, very conservative. You would think if anywhere it would be there, that it would be like totally illegal. A woman right now could go online and she can order the chemical abortion pill, and it ships straight to her door. It'll come in from India, Pakistan, Mexico. It could come from New York or California, which, by the way, those states are in violation of full faith and credit under the law, under the U.S. Constitution. They are sending in, abortion doctors, quote unquote, in New York are sending these pills to people in Texas. There is no oversight on that. There is basically nothing. So it is true, technically, that abortion is illegal in Texas, kind of, but they're still sending the pills in and people are still getting the pills. So the question now becomes, how do we stop the pills? That's really the question. And so the legislature here has tried some good attempts, opening the door for civil litigation against these doctors. But like in New York, a doctor will send the pills in and somebody will sue, but New York has a shield law, is what they call it. So even if you successfully sue the doctor, you can't get anything out of them. New York won't send them to Texas for any kind of punishment. They won't garnish their wages. They won't do anything like that. They protect the abortionists. So that's one of the big issues. The other one is, continuing on that hypothetical, a woman gets the chemical abortion drug in Texas. She can walk into her local sheriff's office, police precinct, whatever, with the pills and with a positive pregnancy test, one of the really clear ones that says pregnant on it right there. And she can say, I know that this is my child. I know it's a human being. I know abortion is wrong. I know it's illegal. Watch this. And she can take the pill right in front of them. Totally legal. That is totally legal. So no, abortion is not illegal in the state of Texas because there is a total caveat in situations such as that, which now is the vast majority of all abortions are DIY. They're at home. So it's no longer, people don't go to a physical location. The physical locations are shutting down. They're being replaced in your mailbox. You don't have to go to a physical location. By the way, speaking of the chemical abortion pill, if you or anybody you ever know takes a chemical abortion, there's a good chance it can be reversed. Abortion pill reversal. Check it out, abortionpillreversal.com. There's resources all over the place. Supplemental progesterone, totally safe. There's been thousands, like more than 7,000 babies have been saved after a woman took the pill. Anyways, how do we do it? Well, the first step in that is education. To give a long-winded answer to your very good question, Abe Lincoln once famously said, if you gave me 6 hours to cut down a tree, I'll spend the first 4 sharpening my axe. So we need a culture that's ready to swing the sword, right? We have to sharpen it, we have to have a culture that's ready. So actually the most tangible thing is this. This is the most tangible thing. The most tangible thing is every single one of us behaving like abortion really is what it is. And that'll change this overnight. But we need the culture to change before we can get the hardcore legislation that really does cut the head off of it, but it's cultural. Yeah?
So I'm Christian and I'm pro-life, but what do you think about rape? What if the woman is raped?
It's a very good question. It's one of the most common questions that you hear. And if there is going to be an exception, you can understand why it would be that. That is the most heartbreaking, horrible, awful situation in the world. But let me ask this. We all know about the Epstein stuff that's going on, all these horrible people. We haven't really had any justice on that, in my opinion. Let's say tomorrow the DOJ says we got him. We got somebody, right? The worst person on the Epstein list. This guy is a freaking demon, right? We go through it all. He's tried, convicted in court. But it's time to sentence him. And instead of sentencing him, the judge says, bring out his daughter. We're going to kill her. Bring out his daughter, we're going to kill her. That's what happens if we make the exception for rape. The child in the womb did nothing wrong. Just like the child of the horrible, evil, awful person, the Epstein guy, we want that dude to be killed, right? If anybody's getting killed, it's the offender. It's the one who did wrong. Never, ever, ever should we look at an instance of an injustice, of an evil, and say the answer to this evil is to kill a kid. That's not something I'm on board with. But we have to wrap around that woman. You know, we have to do, I would say, we have to do a lot more as a society to love those people, to be with them 110%. You understand, you have to have empathy in these situations. You have to be there for them. But the answer to a moral evil is never to kill a baby. Any others? Yeah?
Do you think, when you're talking about men should pick up the sword, do you think we should go more towards like legislation? Do you think legislation is going to be something that's going to fix that? Or should we go a different route to try to get this?
Both. So the question is when men get involved, do we pursue legislation or do we perhaps pursue something else? It is very much true, the law can serve, it does not always, but the law can serve as a tutor. And what I mean by that is when the law changes, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes culture will also change. I don't know what you think about it, this isn't the reason I'm here today, but the Obergefell decision, which legalized gay marriage, for example, in the United States, is a great example of the law being a tutor, fundamentally changed everything about American culture. Gay marriage, from the Supreme Court, the law was a tutor, it influenced the culture. So it is true that it's downstream, but it's also true that it's upstream. The culture can change legislation. There's a good saying that good laws don't make good people, and that is also true. So it's both. It's I don't know what the third leg would be, but it's kind of like a three-legged stool. You have to have all of them. You have to have the educational side, you have to have the legislative side. I would argue right now the legislative comes after the cultural, in my opinion. It just seems this is such a 50-50 issue. Getting through good legislation is going to prove very difficult, so let's make it a 60-40 issue. And then we'll get it. Yeah?
Is there one succinct statement that you could build that we could, when we're tabling, for example, in the Commons, and we're talking to someone who's really angry or has been really hurt by rape, for example,
Yeah.
how would you talk to them and say, okay, it's still your moral responsibility
Yeah.
to speak out?
That's a good question, and it's a very real circumstance that does happen. So the question is basically when you run into somebody who's been personally affected. There's a variety of ways that this could be. And by the way, there are so many people who have been personally affected by abortion. So when you run into somebody and this strikes a nerve, it is wise to take a step back and understand that you're probably dealing with somebody who has been personally impacted by this and move forward in a very loving way. You're not going to beat somebody over the head who's in a very bad position, who's dealt with serious trauma that comes with anything related to abortion. Certainly, if you introduce rape into it, oh my goodness, deal with that person with great love and great, because you are not going to whack them over the head into being on your side. There is no, I wish there was one simple sentence that you could be like, wah, wah, and it would just change their mind. Unfortunately, there's not. You got to play every situation differently, and you got to be genuine. That you're not going to There's no one-liner, there's no phony, anything that could be done. That's actually worse. And sometimes I will throw this in here. It is not a bad thing if you're a pro-life advocate. It's not a bad thing to say in a certain circumstance, my goodness, that's difficult. I don't know. Let's think about it. Me and you together, let's think about it. And we'll workshop this together and we'll work it through. That can be very effective if you're in a position, and it's genuine. It's gotta be genuine, don't do it phony. But if you run into something like that, that's a good way to do it. Yeah.
I think one of the concerns that women have with keeping a baby is having to or be tied to a man
Yeah.
that could potentially use this child to abuse them for their entire life.
Yeah.
Do you think that it would be a better option to, instead of having an abortion, being able to legally detach or break that relationship with that man if the woman chooses that they don't want this man in their life?
Mhm.
It's a tough question because the child needs a father.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if the guy is the worst, most evil Jeffrey Epstein
Yeah.
person in this world, but what can be done in that case?
Yeah.
Because I think, like I said, the issue is having a family with a dysfunctional dad who is abusive in the end.
Yeah, it's a good question. Realistically, my brain says that that's a question for the family law courts, and we already have to a degree. Hopefully there's a good way for it to be applicable here. We already have, if there's a really abusive father in situations like that, where you hate to think of these situations, but where it is important to be removed. And there's also adoption. I mean, adoption can be a very loving, I've spoken with plenty of people. We do a radio show, podcast with Life Issues Institute. I've spoken to plenty of people who were placed for adoption into a loving home. I've spoken with plenty of people who lovingly placed their child into a great home. And it was a huge blessing for everybody on both sides. So it's messy and you hate to see those situations, but we do have, between family law and et cetera. Yeah.
You said men go carry their sword to
Yeah.
control. What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a good question, and then she asked something kind of similar. It's this. It is this. It's you behaving like abortion is murder. If you're educated on it already, go to battle. Go and not like crazy mode, but talk to people about this issue. Talk to people. You have every single person in here. We had like a great turnout. This was amazing, by the way. We had, 35 people, something like this. Every person has a sphere of influence beyond just them. People always underestimate what they can do. You personally, absolutely, I believe this, and it might be irrational. If everybody in this room went out and for real behaved like abortion was murder and said, we're going after this thing, it will change right here in this room. We could look back at this years from now and say, yeah, one of you guys had an insane voice you didn't even know, but you started acting on it, and it changed everything. So it's every person using their sphere of influence. You might go to church. You might have a friend group. You might have whatever it is. Oh my goodness, so much dominoes. You can look at tons of examples throughout human history. One comes to my mind from Spain. There was the Spanish Reconquista. Think of it whatever you will. There was a tiny little group of Christians, like a little tiny group of Christians in the country of Spain. All of the rest of the country was Islamic. And nobody would have thought those guys could do anything. It was this little teeny tiny group, and there's countless examples like this. They fought back and took all of Spain back. And it's like, that started in a room like this. You know what I'm saying? That started in a room where somebody had the courage to say, you know what? Let's end it. Let's do it, for real. And that's what it looks like. So, kind of cliche in a way, but it's every single one of us has to behave and really act like abortion is murder. Did you have?
I did, in a sense that, I'm on your side, of course, but I work part-time at a pregnancy center. I live in DC, fun fact. So I'm in DC, so very different than the atmosphere here, and I work part-time at a pregnancy center, and I just think it's really funny because the people I work with, almost all of them are pro-choice, and it says a lot about the social element to some liberals' point. I think that there is a social element there to that, and so I think something that can be really frustrating for me is that, for example, we say right now, if there were genocides going on, we would speak about it. But, not to be political, but I'm sure there's stuff all over the world, you know what I mean? But we can't speak on everything, you know what I mean? And so, how do we choose what we do and don't speak on? And then, if we truly do feel this way, then why aren't we also working at a pregnancy center?
Yeah.
Why aren't we also at the volunteer shelter? You know what I mean?
And that's a great point. That's part of behaving like it really is. If we're going to say it, we need to do it. And there's a lot of pregnancy centers all around that need help. And that's a fact. If you want to get involved, reach out to me. We can use you. Like my organization would be more than happy to plug you in, connect you, get us involved. We have a great network of different people where if it's not something that you can help us, we'll get you in touch with the people that you can help. And so that's a great point. It's 100% true. And I would actually go a step further even, and I would say there's a degree of hypocrisy. And there's a degree of hypocrisy that's been evident to everybody in the world, where if we say all this stuff and then we don't act on it, do we even believe it? Like, that's the question that culture reasonably can ask of us. Like, if we say all this and I give some impassionate rah-rah about this stuff, and then I just never do anything else ever, okay, did you really believe it? And unfortunately, that's kind of what you're seeing, like up in Virginia. Weird place, by the way. But up there, like, that's a microcosm where they're seeing that happen. Yeah. Yeah.
So, amazing speech, by the way.
Thank you.
But who do you propose the troll is? Is it status quo, or is it the pro-choice advocates?
Not the pro-choice advocates. Don't cut their heads off. That's not the troll. So who is the troll is the question. The troll, you could say, is the abortion industry. Like you could make it very literal and say it's like Planned Parenthood. We defunded them. Congress did at least. You could make it to an entity. I think it's beyond that. In my personal, not answering for anybody else or even on behalf of my organization, I would personally say it's straight up Satan. That's what I would say. Is it's literally satanic. A lot of what we see. But it's the culture that disrespects life. If you had to put like a name on it, it would be the cultural disrespect for the sanctity of human life. And that has to be changed. By the way, this isn't just about abortion. I mean, this is about it, obviously. But the end of life. We have people in Canada being slaughtered in euthanasia. That is the same disease. That's the same curse that we're seeing at the upper end of this, right? We're seeing the same thing that trickles down again to the point of it's not a vacuum. They're killing, I don't even know how many it was. It's a number that's like hard to wrap your head. It's almost comical. It's not comical because it's people dying, but they're just butchering people in Canada. That's the same animal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're talking about what it looks like to pick up the sword. I'm curious as to what that looks like for you growing up and making your way into the role that you are at now at Life Histories Institute.
Yeah, so I was blessed growing up. I had the unique opportunity. I'm a big believer that nobody should ever be told what to think. That doesn't work. It's actually a fool's errand, and it's kind of counterproductive, and it's a little bit stupid. Don't ever tell anybody what to think. Tell them why. Why do you think these things? So I grew up in a very pro-life household, and I vividly remember being in the car with my dad. I was like 12 or something, and what kind of 12-year-old has this conversation? But I was like, Dad, the abortion topic, what about rape? I was like, what about that? Because, oh my goodness, if there's going to be a reason, that would be an exception. That would be it. And he had an amazing answer. And I was like, dang, that's a really great, so that was a huge blessing for me. So I was involved politically from the time I was very young. My family was involved in local politics. So I was doing it anyway, working campaigns, by the way. We talk about like, pick up the sword. You ever knocked doors before? It sucks. It sucks. I've done a lot of it. I've knocked like thousands and thousands and thousands of doors. We have a lot of people who want to do big stuff, but they won't knock a door, you know? And so I grew up knocking doors, and I grew up involved in it, the grassroots stuff. That's where the flashy stuff isn't what changes much. It's find out who are your pro-life candidates and knock doors for that dude. Or maybe it's not doors, I don't know, maybe it's all like gated communities or something. Phone banks, call. Make calls for that candidate. Talk to people, those sorts of things. I kind of grew up in that. Eventually I ended up doing social media stuff, and I'm kind of washed on social media. I don't really do much on there like I used to. But I had no experience in doing anything like that. I just picked up a camera and I just started yapping one day. The first video I ever made was about how there's been millions of abortions. And I was like, this is horrible. We got to say something. It took off, and I don't know, I might be at like 1 billion views by now or something like that. Hundreds and hundreds of millions and all this stuff. It all came from just one day. I decided I'm going to start swinging this thing. I got nothing, but I'm going to use it. And Lord only knows where that ends up.
Follow up, what steps did you take to educate yourself on the topic?
A lot of research. So I'm big on apologetics. I'm a very logical guy. And by the way, shameless plug, if you're facing pro-abortion arguments, lifeissues.org. Lifeissues.org homepage, we have an apologetics section. And it's all of if there's an argument that you face that we have not addressed, I will personally, I promise, I will see to it that we have it updated on our website. Anything that you run into as an argument for abortion, we've got an answer for it, and it's a good one. But I was big on the apologetic side. So for me, it's not what to believe, it's why. And so I needed to be able to rigorously defend anything that somebody comes to me with. And they say, well, what about this? And if you're in that position and you've never thought it through before, you're like, I don't know, and that's a bad place to be. So steelman their argument, right? If you're a pro-life advocate, put yourself, it's really awkward sometimes, put yourself in the shoes of a pro-abortion advocate and think, what is the best possible explanation that I could give? And then step back into your pro-life shoes and say, okay, what's my response to that?